Hello everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Ben Mahesson and I'm the BGA Membership Account Manager at AMBA BGA. Today I'll be talking with Jill Taylor about her experiences as a co-founder and CEO of not just one, but 3 remarkable businesses. During her tenure as CEO at Burgerville, Jill demonstrated exceptional leadership during the challenging times of COVID-19, with strategic flexibility and a commitment to the local economies. She forged partnerships with local farmers, ensuring the sustainability of the business while supporting the community as a whole. The topic for today's interview with Jill Taylor is going to be around leading with purpose, a case study in responsible leadership with Jill Taylor. And I'd like to welcome Jill Taylor. Jill, thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be here, Ben. Thank you.
Amazing. So just to kick off, could you give a brief more introduction to yourself, Jill, and talk a little bit about what is Burgerville?
Sure. I started my career as a pediatric nurse, so I already had a look at what it means to be well and healthy. I moved into business for multiple personal reasons in terms of business can be a catalyst for change. Business can help us build a better world if we are willing to be what you're saying, responsible for what we're doing and the manner in which we're doing it. So that's really how I approached business from the beginning. And then Burgerville was a client of my consulting company. And at a certain point, they got into some trouble and needed to release a CEO, and I stepped in as the interim person. And it became a permanent position. And it was probably a couple of years before COVID hit, and that gave us time to, we hit multiple things along the way, financial breakdowns, cyber breach, cybersecurity problem, lawsuits, getting all of that smoothed out while we were building the business, while we were moving out into the community and working locally. And then COVID hit, as everybody knows, and what it took.
The disruption.
Through that, yes, it was such a major disruption. And we'd already been through a few disruptions, but this one was a big one. We lost 40% of our business in 3 days.
Oh, wow.
And because of the work that we had been doing and the work with the local community and the work in employee and leadership development, we were able to retool ourselves and get back within and reestablish income in about a week, and begin to serve not just our community, but also at that point, first responders. It was such a heavy lift for a while, and we felt like our first responders needed a little bit of care. So we used to take burger meals up to them or to them in different ways. So Burgerville is a quick service restaurant company. It was a $100 million company and about 40 units across the Pacific Northwest.
And I see. Were you aware of this fast food chain before you took the job? Because I know, as you were saying before, it tries to be, although you call it a fast food chain, if anything, by looking at the website and even going to restaurants, it feels a bit more like a finer dining experience, is a bit more ecological, a bit more sustainable. So was that always the product of Burgerville?
That was the project that my company signed up for and provided some work to help them do that. And I think some of that work really helped them start to put themselves on the map a little bit more. Burgerville's always been aligning a company and a team behind a purpose, and then let's make a difference. Let's see what we can do together. They had just started some local outreach, and as CEO of the company, I was able to take that further and put deeper on the ground some of the things that we became known for in the community. And people could trust our food. People could come and say, well, in a pinch, I'm going to come here because I know the food's safe, I know it's healthy, and we'll move on.
Definitely,
But
definitely.
it's kind of a fast casual sort of environment. You're right. It's not quite fast food, and it has a drive-through, so it can be both, I guess.
Definitely. And it seems to be, I've noticed this in the UK and around Western Europe, that there's this more of a trend still to have fast food, but not fast in the sense it's bad for you with bad meat. And we've seen the rise of like Leon in London, for example, and there's healthier ones around. I've seen in France and Germany. And so I know America has its fair share of meat industry problems as well as the rest of the world. So no, there must as well be quite a large appetite, especially in the area of, is it mainly Oregon? Is that correct? Where these
Oregon and Washington, yeah,
okay.
up
Nice.
there in that northwest corner.
And how many restaurants were there in total?
40 spread
40.
out across Oregon and Washington. And just before COVID hit, we were getting ready to expand
Mhm,
further up north and further out east
mhm.
into places, other cities in Oregon and Washington. We
Amazing.
did make the decision at that point to be a regional restaurant company. Did
Okay.
we want to be national? Did we want to sell franchises?
Mhm.
We weren't sure about franchises, but we didn't want to be a national brand. We wanted to be able to make a difference regionally, and so we focused as a regional company.
Amazing. And because with Burgerville, you said it's what it was created. Was it before COVID? How many years? How old exactly is Burgerville now?
Yeah, Burgerville actually was started in 1961. The founder actually had attended or visited a McDonald's that started in California. And after that, he came up to Oregon and said, we're going to start our own burger joint. And they did. And it gradually grew over the years. And the work that myself and another consultant helped them with is to double the company and actually spread into 40 units and being high performance, being able to really serve well and perform well.
Amazing. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear because they are actually very different business models, I think, as well. They're very different target market. You know, McDonald's, you don't need to really say much about it, whereas Burgerville is, like you said, more regional. So being more regional allows them to be more community driven. And was that kind of some of the reasons why you decided to take the CEO position at Burgerville because of some of these responsible management ideas?
Yeah. Yeah, I was really curious to see how far we could do make a live like business with a purpose and be responsible leaders. They we designed with them a program that they actually called Responsible Community Leaders. And it was
Okay.
training in how do you start to live from purpose individually and as a company and as a team, and then what kind of reach can we have? What kind of difference can we make together? So that was a reason I stepped in. I wanted to see it move forward. I wanted to help them get past some of the breakdowns, crises they were having, and then take it further. Um,
Absolutely. Before we talk about some of the crises, including COVID, which I know you mentioned is a very interesting topic for for Burgerville, but I kind of want to focus first on what makes Burgerville a responsibly minded restaurant. And I know you've discussed how about I think it was 75% of the food in Burgerville was produced in the local region, and that's not just in Oregon; it's actually nearby. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
sure. Yeah, so they started being like a locally sourced company because they were small in the beginning. And as they grew, it became clear that they wanted to do more. They have a mission of serve with love. And we were there when they began to create that mission. And I said, are you sure you want to take that step for a business, having a mission of serve with love? could be misinterpreted multiple ways. And the founder at the time was very clear, no, this is really what we're up to. So it became, how do we align with that? And then what does that mean for us?
Mhm.
And so the local started by changing the beef over to holistically managed ranch in the Allen Savory kind of education that they were doing with ranchers, Allen Savory and his crew. And so they found a crew of ranchers that were holistically managed, so they would be grass-fed, but they'd still be finished in the finishing places where
Yeah.
most beef is. What they could do at that point was trace the beef back to its source. And so when people were having E. coli problems, Burgerville wasn't, because they were clear beef was safe. They, with the ranchers, made sure that the practices were in place to keep it safe and secure. And you could trace where each shipment of beef came
Mhm.
from, which ranch, and if you needed to go back and see it. Plus, they would also introduce the ranchers to the community by inviting them into the restaurants. And so it was a great project to be a part of
Absolutely.
and to help to train the leaders to understand what is it to be a responsible leader
Mm.
and how do you work from a purpose or what I'm here for. Why am I here? What am I being called to do? And who does that help me become? Were some primary questions that we had people start to look at. Because what we could tell as far as the market changes all
Yeah.
the time, how does it now express? So I could say, well, here's the purpose, put it on the shelf, it's done. But really, living with a purpose, being a responsible leader is really about, okay, so now how does it want to be expressed? And
Mhm.
so as we went through the different crises or we went through COVID, we always had to keep looking and talking together as a team. Okay, so what does this look like now? And
Mhm.
what are we starting to see needs to happen? And we actually reached further into the community, the local community. So I think it was about 50, 60% of the menu was local. We moved it up to 75%.
Oh.
And so that just before COVID hit, our most of our supply chain was local. And
Mhm.
so we didn't have to wait for shipments to come in from places where the plants had closed or things couldn't happen. There came a time when distribution was more of a problem than actually getting our product. So there were times when we had to personally pick up and deliver
Mhm.
a product to the restaurants, but I mean, that's part of the COVID story at some point.
Of course, and so speaking of COVID, like you said, all your food is locally grown, and that's something I personally like to see. If I went to a fast food chain like McDonald's, I always know this food's probably not very good for me, relatively processed, and very opposite of local. And so Burgerville having a more local touch to it, and you can see that straight away from the website. So even your marketing is very much on that side. But I think what makes me was very interested about the responsible management element of it is that you're looking after the farmers, you're paying them respectively, you're making sure every single person in the supply chain is the stakeholder engagement is great. Which means, like I said, when COVID comes, people can pull together and it's not so much a problem. And speaking of COVID, did you notice that maybe McDonald's and Burger King in the areas had loads of supply problems and you were absolutely fine?
Yeah, people would sometimes call us and ask if we were having supply problems. And I mean, we took the approach during COVID with supply, like, here's what we need. And if other restaurant chains need more product, then great. This is this is what we need to cover what we need to cover, and we'll just do this week to week, and we'll just make sure that it gets spread around. A lot of the national chains, however, have their own contracts set up with larger suppliers from more of an industrial ag sort of perspective. So I felt like we could be a lot more nimble and a lot more responsive with our suppliers and with the
Yeah.
needs of the community.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jill. And speaking about of course, the responsible management element, but especially around looking after your stakeholders, I know that you were talking the other day about the ratification of the labour contract. And I know you were one of the first fast food chains in the nation to to cover the employees with a collective bargaining agreement. And so, could you explain a little bit more about what this labour contract means and who it impacts?
Yeah. Um, so because of the training and education and development that Burgerville provided all of its employees around how do you live a mission or a purpose, and how do we start to align behind that, and then what does that mean about me? Most of the managers were trained in that way, leadership and the managers. When the union started to come in, we were concerned about the disruption to that development and that training that we felt like enabled us to live from a mission and a purpose and be able to be responsive. So I would say in the beginning we were, well, I came into it later, but in the beginning they were quite nervous about unionizing.
Mm,
And then as it moved along, and this was, I say, just before COVID, is when we were the first fast food company that ratified a union contract.
mhm,
And it wasn't as disruptive as we thought it would be, and it enabled great conversation
mhm,
between managers and employees in ways that probably had fallen off in their practices. I think it's always important to keep looking at how are we caring for our employees, and Burgerville had been ready to create some salary increases. Um, and then the state of Oregon and Washington had put in place um, uh, laws that said you had to raise minimum wage. So while Burgerville was doing it and the laws were coming in place about raising minimum wage for our employees, the union just helped it along and made it happen faster. And we were happy to be able to do that. Perhaps not in the beginning, but certainly as we saw, okay, it's really helping our employees. So let's go. Let's do it.
absolutely. And as you said, looking after the local community through using their product, but also giving them the good job security, allowing, like you said, to speak to unions and let their voice be heard. That can drive fantastic ideas and really help to engage in community, which you could argue is maybe the opposite for some of the larger chains who are more of a let's make as much money as possible. So,
Right.
so my question was, it's kind of to do with the product of, in the sustainability mind as well. But why did you decide to go down the route of being, more responsible, but could mean your profits decline or you can't get cheaper beef elsewhere? What made you
Yeah.
decide, no, I want to look after community and I want to look after the local farmers?
Yeah, it was a journey through how do we both make money and care for our local community and the health and well-being of our employees.
Mhm,
And so we knew there were certain investments that would have to be made with perhaps suppliers that cost a little bit more. When we moved into receiving beef, setting up a way to work with the ranchers that used regenerative agricultural practices.
mhm,
We saw that as a way that could be a win both for Burgerville as well as the community and the regenerative agricultural ranchers, to really show a way to invest, not just to get carbon credits or philanthropic people with a lot of money saying, yeah, we're going to invest in this, but to actually create a business model that could make money and support all. That's what we were shooting for. And I would say COVID was a big challenge to that because
Cool.
we closed dining rooms. We kept our drive-through open and did some curbside pickup. Um, and so it was challenging during that time to be as profitable as we had hoped to be,
Yeah.
but we were still profitable. And what we'd seen before COVID is when you actually work with employees to help them understand how to live from purpose and how to actually add their own creativity to some of the innovations that are happening, you actually start to make more money and you actually start to grow in a way that you hadn't probably counted on. You don't, I mean, we started to see as responsible leaders, perhaps we didn't need as much management. Um, we needed more we needed more people to see what it took to be a responsible leader in their chair, whether they were an employee or an assistant manager or a manager or an executive leader running the whole company. And there were times when some of the restaurants and the evaluation that somebody had come in to do it said, oh, this restaurant is only going to be about a $1.2 million restaurant.
Yeah.
Well, we saw out of doing the training and the work with leading with purpose and helping people learn what it is to be a responsible leader, not as a burden, but as being able to have creative response to any situation that emerges. We were able to take that restaurant to 3 times what somebody predicted it would have been valuated at.
Mhm.
So we were able to turn that particular and several other restaurants into a $3.5 million restaurant. And the experts had said, no, that's probably a $1.2 million restaurant. People are more willing to go the extra mile if they know they're being taken care of, they see how to live their purpose. Creatively, they can add to the innovation or how the design's going to go forward, and then they're well compensated. You actually have the opportunity and the possibility to make more money. And then when you put in the local vendors,
Mhm.
there's a kind of loyalty and a kind of commitment to each other that starts to emerge that's different than we have a signed contract and can we get another 10 cents off per pound. Doesn't mean we don't have those conversations, but it means that we have an understanding of what the business model is and how we're moving forward. I mean, there were many ranchers that would come up to me because we would attend the annual meeting that the ranchers would have. And they would say, we're so thankful for Burgerville because to really help them make money, when they, what do they call it? When they produce the beef, when they take it from a live cow to actual beef, there are parts of the cow that don't get used because the major cuts go to great restaurants and grocery stores. And so there's something called trim that we take. It's doesn't mean it's not good beef. It just means the cuttings of some of that and then different how you start to grind that up. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. And they would thank us often for thank you for being a partner with us. Thanks for working with us. And so they would come out and support Burgerville in ways that we hadn't imagined, and as well as many other vendors.
Absolutely, Jill. And I think what you said was incredibly interesting about how when you lead with a purpose, and like you said, you're not squeezing profits or squeezing margins. You're actually paying a little bit extra to the farmers because it gets better buying from them, and then the sort of secondary effects are what you kind of see the opposite happening in some of the larger chains. For example, I don't know how many times you might have gone into a McDonald's and the food is really cheap, but the service is bad. It's sometimes not too clean. The staff are always stressed and run off their feet, and it makes a horrible ambiance. You kind of want to just get out of there. Whereas when I've been to a restaurant or a place where the workers actually care, they're actually well looked after. They're happy, you're happy. You'll tell your friends that it was good, and personally, I don't mind spending extra couple of dollars or if I know that food is well, grass fed. It's the farmers are well looked after.
Yeah, yeah, that was really truly the case. Because a lot of our guests, our customers and our guests would say, boy, when I go into the other restaurants, I just don't get served in the same way. And that's why we love to come here. Plus, if I'm going to eat fast food, I'm going to come to Burgerville. Because exactly what you said, I know the food is good, and I also hired chefs. So to start to see how to use local products, like we had a blueberry farmer that said, I have a surplus of blueberries this year, and it was grown on a biodynamic farm. So we didn't want to see them go to waste. The chefs that I hired actually said, great, let's make a blueberry milkshake and let's make it a seasonal product. So people in the summer can come and get a fresh blueberry milkshake from a biodynamic farm where the nutrients are um, documented, well grounded, just fresh and beautiful tasting. So we did both things where we could present seasonal food. So people start to get, there's growing seasons and there's great food. And how do I stay connected to the farms and the ranchers in my day-to-day work? And then how do we support the local vendors who are doing things?
Amazing. Thank you, Joyce. Like you said, it's almost a like infectious emotions around it. Like seeing, working well with the community really has its positive effects that you probably have very much missed in larger chains where they're very focused on making profits, and that could be argued as less responsibly managed. But it's very refreshing to hear what you've done at Burgerville.
Yeah. Yeah, and it has people feel proud of what they do. So you don't necessarily think of people being proud of working at a fast food chain. It's kind of like, well, if anything else, I can work at a fast food chain, make some money until I get a position that I want. Or sometimes it's a first job for young people. And to have it be a great environment in which people are proud of it and proud of the contribution they are, it makes a huge difference to how much money you'll make or the kind of satisfaction and repeat business you get from customers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jill. And while we're talking about regenerative farming and sustainability, I know regenerative farming is trying to combat some of the problems we have around climate change, especially forest fires, by making the soil incredibly dry. And I know from our previous conversations, you told me about forest fires that happen in the region and some of the ways that you combated and helped with Burgos. So I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about that.
Sure. Um, so when we started to work with the regenerative agricultural ranchers, um, we decided to put products on the menu that showcase their products. And during the summer, we had a huge wildfire happen. Don't know if you know the geography of the Northwest, but the Columbia River, it's a big river, comes down and separates Oregon and Washington. And the fire was um, just moving down both sides of Oregon and Washington. And the smoke was really, really bad. And some employees would call and say, look, I can't, I've got asthma. I can't go out.
Mhm.
This is really dangerous. And this is where having a union there, as well as dealing with forest fire and our local vendors, as a responsible leader, you often have to weigh all the factors as you make a decision about what's going to have us really support what we need to do as a company, how do we take care of our employees, and then how do we make sure that our vendors get what they need to be able to keep serving us. And we ended up closing some restaurants, but not shutting down what we would purchase in terms of food. We put it over to the other restaurants that could stay open because the air was still okay, and close those restaurants where the air was really bad. And they were saying, don't have your employees come out, or don't have people come out into the air because it really is bad quality and it could cause problems for you.
Yeah.
And the union was happy about that. The
Mhm.
board wasn't as happy as about
About to
that.
say, yeah,
And
shutting down
right.
the
And
shops.
the vendors were just happy that we found a way to take care of it and not have to diminish what we were receiving or ordering from them, but be able to shift it to other places. So it's things like that when a situation arises that you either haven't dealt with before or you've never experienced something like that,
Hmm.
being able to work through it and look at multiple things from the purpose or the mission of the company. Okay, what's serve with love here? And how would we serve all these people? Not let's take care of you and then this one ends up being trashed. No, it was how do we move this forward so there's little impact for all of us? And it
Absolutely.
did work. Yeah, it did work.
Yeah, and so you said about the union's been happy because I remember you saying that all the employees got full pay, but of course if the restaurant is shut and the pay's still going out, is that a reason why board members were not happy, or was there other reasons such as other shops being open at the time?
We felt like because it was environmental and we were making the decision, I mean, a lot of fast food restaurants kept their doors open. And that's what the board was pointing to, like other companies and restaurants are staying open. How come we're not?
Hmm.
And then we did give them 3 days, like we'll pay for you for 3 days in these restaurants that we were closing down. And that's where the union was really happy with us. And the board was like, let's not do that again, or let's find a different way to serve with love and do something. It's I guess what I'd say about that is there's times when you'll make mistakes. There's times when, and I'm not necessarily saying it's a mistake, but that was a stakeholder that I hadn't thought about. And it definitely impacted the board as they were looking at what kind of profit are we bringing in? And that's an important thing. It's an important that it not be the only thing. And because there are ways that you will recover that income or that profit if you can be aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it and who you're including. So in being a responsible leader and having a creative response to whatever situation emerges,
Mhm.
you learn from it. And you're like, okay, we did pretty good here, not so great there. Let's see how we can bring that into learning as we move along, growing the company and taking care of people. So it's always that kind of job, I guess, as you're leading with purpose and being a responsible leader. It's not just do the right thing, it's also being aware of what's the impact on people when I make this decision.
Yeah.
And both are important.
No, absolutely. And as I know you said, the board members at the time you went against their wishes and no, we have to shut it for the better of the employees and maybe the community, which could be very, let's say, positive news around it. If McDonald's and Burger King around the corner are staying open, employees are forced to go through the smog, that's going to affect them quite negatively. However, they, keeping it open will be better for their profits. So you're seeing a big difference between being responsibly minded, but also being conscious of profits. And so I do understand it. And following that, then, did you say your board members were maybe a bit more unhappy with you on that aspect, or did they more trust your judgment because of the outcome?
Yeah, so there's a couple things there. Is I like what you pointed to. There's the short-term and long-term impact. Like if you make a short-term decision that might go against what a board or others might think, there's the long-term impact where you can recover and get more because you both did the right thing and were aware of the impact. And I would say, no, the board was probably wary of me after that. Like, oh, she's gonna go a little wild on us, maybe. And so for me, my learning was making sure that I'm in conversation with them about here's what we're seeing, here's what the mission of Serve with Love is pointing to. We won't have enough to keep the restaurant open anyway because people are calling out. They're not going to come out in this level of toxic smoke. Like there could have been a much better communication to them on my part. And what I discovered is being more in communication as a responsible leader to the stakeholders is where the difference gets made.
Absolutely, and I can imagine in that example you said with the board wanting to keep it open, it's not saying that there are people who think no, send the employees into smoke, I don't care. It could be a mixture, like you said. If there's bad communication, then they might not on their news channel. It might show it not being as bad, and they're thinking, why are we shutting it over a little bit of smoke? This is over dramatic, which is exactly the sort of thing that happened in COVID. People are like, nope, it's fine, crack on, don't worry about it. But like you said, the most important thing as a responsible leader, like you did, was get the information as quick as possible, act on it on everyone's best interest. And like you said, for the local project producers, the workers, people not wanting to leave their house, most of the stakeholders are saying, no, you should shut it, apart from the board members, then you've got to do the right thing by, like you said, everyone, not just the ones that hold the money.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
It was an awful experience and it was a good learning. I mean, to have to deal with that kind of, I've never seen that kind of smoke, and I'm sure others have dealt with big fires around them, but it was something. So being able to be a calm presence while you're sorting the information and seeing, okay, here's what looks like we need to do, and then working with your team because it's never just a CEO decision
Mhm.
singly. And when you're leading from a company with purpose and you're a responsible leader, you actually have a team that you count on and that you work with. And so much of what happened at Burgerville was about the team. because they were able to be responsible leaders and have that kind of conversation together. I like this, I don't like that. What about that? If we do this, this could happen. And so sorting through those conversations was important as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jill. Thank you. And then, so when did you step down from Burgerville? Was it? It was a couple of years ago, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, so the owners wanted to take the company in a different direction, which didn't do away with the mission or the local, as you can see on the website. All of that is still there. They just wanted to do something different because the original owners were getting older and needed a succession plan, and so they were looking within their family to see how to move that forward. And I was really complete with the work at Burgerville. It wasn't my um, lifelong dream to be a CEO of a fast food company. And I loved the opportunity. What I learned working with the people there was really amazing.
Yeah.
It was a great experience, and I was ready to take what I learned and then start to see how to move it into work with other companies and other
Mhm.
leaders and teams.
Amazing, amazing. And so, can you tell us very briefly before we end today's session a little bit about some of the projects you're doing, and are you still encouraging that responsible management, that sustainability element through your work in your current roles and companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so the work that we're doing now, what we noticed through all of the work that we did at Burgerville is the way people are thinking about business and there's an old way of thinking about business. And for us to deal with the kinds of complex challenges that are coming at us now, that are often happening all at the same time, you don't just get the luxury of, oh, there's one thing happening and I can deal with that, and then blah, blah, blah. So we're taking what we learned at Burgerville with both sustainability, but also the kind of difference that putting a purpose and a both individually and collectively in place
Mhm.
does for um, a person's ability to be creative and be that responsible leader. So we're creating some new ways for people to do that. We just started to receive a project. A colleague of mine came to me and said, "Look, I'm working with this homeless, unsheltered um, company here in Oregon." And he said, "It's an amazing business model." He said it's something that has been created by the homeless, the unsheltered, for the homeless, the unsheltered,
I see.
hiring the homeless, the unsheltered, because they had skills and abilities they just couldn't do because they were houseless.
Mhm.
And he said this business model has effectively gotten people off the street, trained them, and started to
Wow.
help them be responsible citizens again. He said, I'd like to see us take that national. So, because homeless is a big issue here in the United States.
Yeah.
I haven't checked about abroad. So there are issues as a result of climate change and in the inequality in
Mm.
incomes that's
Societal issue.
yeah, that's having people be houseless. And so I think business can start to deal with that, not in a charitable way, but in a way that is like at Burgerville, a business model that actually will help people invest in something and show government there's a different way to do this, and be working in partnership with government and people to see there's a different way for it to happen. So besides some of the leadership companies that we're working with, this was a really interesting project that was like, huh,
Mm.
that there could be something here. And the model of it is something that I'm intrigued by, that was similar to Burgerville. Like, how do you lead from a mission with responsible leaders and drive something so that it benefits all? How do we do that and show how to solve one of those insidious problems that we've dealt with or not dealt with over time? There are different solutions, and we're saying that responsible leaders with leading with purpose can actually learn how to innovate in a much different way. So there's a level of conscious awareness um, that is useful, really useful in changing people's thinking, to be able to see more and be more creative in how they approach what they're looking at or how they're resolving something. So we're working on that.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you. It's good to hear you're still keeping to focusing on companies and consulting on companies that still trying to think of how is my impact, what it is my impact for anything from, like you said, the local farmers to the employees to societal issues such as homelessness or sorry shelteredness. That it's great to hear that you're still trying to address those, and that's ultimately what being a leader with purpose is all about. It's not just about making money, but helping the ecosystem, society as a whole.
That's right. Yep. We need to build a new ecosystem that really does connect with life, and business could do that if we really started to take it in a different direction. So I'm up for it.
Amazing. Thank you,
I
Jill.
think some of your students might be as well, so yay.
I was literally just about to say, Jill, that so the last question before we end today's session is for our students and graduates all around the world, what would you say is your main advice or advice on how to be a good responsible manager?
Yeah, I would say um, the ignition that happens for a leader or an employee from purpose, being purposeful and having a purpose is tremendous as you deal with all the issues you have to deal with. So being clear about that as an ongoing skill to build is really important. And then stepping outside of the walls of business to really see how would we start to innovate this and what would we bring in that would
Mhm.
move the current thinking. Um, I think students have a beautiful opportunity to try out new things and
So I agree. I agree, Joe. And you even seen this in statistics. Like we see our students and graduates are more likely to join a company that has a purposeful meaning. If it's about sustainability, there has to be some obvious impact, not greenwashing. And every company out there is saying how they're green because they might buy carbon credits, but it turns out those carbon credits aren't even real. And so it's very common now that you see students graduates wanting to join a purposeful company. And from the advice you just said, then Jill, is to stick to the mission and the vision. Like you said with Burgerville, multiple times throughout what we've talked about today, you went back to the serve with love element. And that is very important. It's a step, taking a step back, like you're saying, step back, think about innovation, say, what is our mission and what do we want our impact to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. That was great.
I just said what you said in all fairness. I merely took your word, so I cannot take any any part of that. But yeah, thank you again, Jill, so much for your advice there, your insight over Burgerville. And I'm not being funny, but I'm quite hungry for a burger now. You've really got my appetite going. But
Close to dinner.
definitely, yeah, exactly. And thank you again for coming on to talking about your experiences and how to be a leader of purpose. And ultimately, this today is a case study into a responsible leader.
Mm. Thank you so much, Ben. It was a great conversation. I appreciate it. Thanks.
No
And
worries.
I hope all the students really open up and make it happen. Our next generation is an important one. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jill.